Hey everybody, we are back with Michigan Grown, Michigan Great, and today we are in southeast Michigan with the Isley family.
We're excited to have you here to see what we grow and why we grow it and what we think is important about it. And you're gonna be a part of our soybean harvest today. We raise soybeans and we raise corn, and the field that we're standing in right now is a soybean field. And soybeans are a legume, and when they're ready to harvest, they look kind of like a field full of weeds, but they're actually a very valuable crop. Most of the soybeans that we raise, and you can see them here in my hand, but most of the ones that we raise will actually go into livestock feed. They'll be processed. Some of them may also go into oil. Soybean oil is a really valuable commodity, and it can be used in lots of different places, anything from making types of insulation that they use in homes to actually being what they might fry your French fries in. So those are really valuable things. This is my husband Jim. You're going to see Jim when he's taking the soybeans into the market, and this is my son Jacob, and Jacob's going to be driving the combine today. So you'll get a chance to be a part of our actual harvest as we're going through it, and we hope that as you see this, that you have a little better understanding of what we do and why we think that this is a valuable crop and why it's important for you to know more about where your food comes from.
Hey guys, welcome back to this soybean field. As you can see, we're actually up in the combine now, so we're in the combine cab. And if you look down in front of us, we're actually cutting the soybeans off. So what you see is you can actually see the combine head. What that is there's a knife actually at the bottom that moves back and forth, kind of like a serrated blade that cuts those soybeans off. And then the reel that you see going around actually kind of sweeps them into the head. From there, the combine is actually collecting them, bringing them to the center, moving the soybean up underneath where we're sitting, underneath the cab, back into a portion of the machine that's called the rotor. What takes place there is the beans are actually, that were in the pod, once they get into that rotor, they are, it's spinning around. It breaks those pods open, the beans fall out, and actually the pods and the straw is separated from the beans. After that, the beans actually go through another auger and up an elevator. You can actually see the harvested soybeans coming in right behind me as well. So at any point in time, I can see that the soybeans are flowing into the grain tank in the back. So it takes about 15 seconds or from the time that the soybeans are cut in the field to the time that they're actually flowing right into the grain tank in the combine. So pretty impressive piece of machinery. As this combine goes across the field, there's a tremendous amount to watch. At all times, I'm watching the entire head to make sure that there are no rocks or branches or stones, anything coming into the head. We want to make sure that only soybeans are flowing into the combine at this point in time. Other debris can really do damage to the machine. You know, if I get a rock in there, the rock is obviously not going to break open like a soybean pod and actually be able to be harvested. Also, as you can tell right now, I'm actually not touching the steering wheel. Not only are we harvesting soybeans, but at this point in time, you can see over here there's monitors on my right. One of the things that we implement on our farm is we actually collect all of our yield data. So you can actually see our yield map being built here. Each color represents a different yield level. So we can see here these soybeans are averaging about, right now they're going between 60 and 62 bushel. We can see that number and that being painted right here on this yield map. What that allows for us to do is at any point in time, as we plan for next year, we can actually know exactly how each area of the field is performing. So from a sustainability point of view, we're actually, the areas of our field that can produce more, we actually feed them more and we give them more inputs to produce a better crop. But the areas that maybe aren't as high producing because of lack of moisture or maybe not as good a soil in that area, we can actually pull those nutrients back. So at no point in time are we ever over fertilizing or putting excess fertilizer on that area. We actually are tracking every area of the field to make sure that we're fertilizing just the amount for what's going to be produced there for years to come.
Excellent. I want to know, what's a bushel?
So a bushel is a unit of measure. So if you think of a bushel basket, so that old term of a bushel basket, It's actually the unit of volume. In this case, it takes about 60 pounds of soybeans to equal a bushel of soybeans. So depending on the density of the crop, for example, a bushel of corn is the same amount of volume, but it only weighs 56 pounds. Where soybeans, like I said, weigh 60 pounds, and we sell bushels. So as we can see, as I talked about harvesting bushels, that's the same unit that we sell when we go to the elevator and sell bushels of soybeans as well.
Alright, well there's still a lot to harvest here, and as we're doing it, please go ahead and ask your questions and we'll get them live from the field.
One of the big things about harvesting is you want to make sure you're as efficient as possible. So part of that efficiency comes from making sure the combine almost never stops running when the crop is ready to harvest. So you can see here we're still harvesting soybeans, and if you look behind me into the grain tank is full of soybeans. Also, I can see up here on the screen that points to the back that it's starting to get full. What I can do is I can actually start to unload on the go. So if we look outside the door here, I have the grain auger out, and you can see I'm actually going to start to unload. So you can see here that the soybeans are now going out of the hopper via an auger which moves the grain. It's actually going to dump right into the grain cart. So my dad's driving the grain cart here in front of me. So he's in the tractor cab, he's following right along. It takes a lot of attention on his part to make sure that he does not get too close or too far away, so that we're able to load the grain cart efficiently and evenly. As you can see here, the grain cart is very large. I can dump into the grain cart multiple times before we actually have to go empty the grain cart into the semi for the grain to be taken to town to be sold. So as it goes here, the grain cart will fill up, and then once my grain hopper gets empty, I can actually, I will shut the auger off, fold it back up, and I will keep on harvesting so that the combine, as little as possible, is stopped. Because anytime the combine stops, of course, the crop is not being harvested. Potentially time is lost, as soybean harvest can be very dependent on weather and other factors that are out of our control. So as it goes closer, you can see that the grain tank behind me has pretty much emptied out. So I can actually shut that auger off. What I'll do is, since that auger's turned off, I'll signal my dad that he can now go on his way. And then once the grain cart is out of the way, I will fold that auger back in, and the combine will continue to work and continue to roll. Hey guys, welcome back to the cab. I want to go over a couple common questions that I get. One of the common questions is people ask me a lot is say, well, what did it take to get the soybean to this point in time? So obviously we're harvesting. These soybeans are actually planted in about the middle of May. So we started planting soybeans about the 15th. We were done by about the 22nd. Worked really hard to get those planted. So these soybeans were planted right into standing corn stalks. Once they were planted, we actually wait for those soybeans to emerge and start to grow. Once they're growing and they're up out of the ground, the first thing we actually come back and do is we actually make a pass with a pesticide application. What that is actually to remove and to kill any weeds that are growing in this crop. Like I said, we want this crop to be very pure and be all 100% soybeans. We don't be harvesting a lot of weed seed that goes through into that would stunt the growth and also reduce the yield of the soybeans. Also, after the herbicide pass, we let them grow, and as they start to get into the reproductive stage of their growth cycle, so what that means is the plants are actually starting to form the pods that will hold the beans on the soybean plant. Once into that reproductive cycle of life, we actually come back through and make a fungicide application. So that fungicide is actually to help to keep the soybeans disease-free, to keep them healthy. So at the end of the day, we have good quality soybeans. It also can help increase yield, to increase some productivity on the acres as well. After that, it's really a matter of time, and we let these soybeans mature. They start to drop their leaves and start to turn this brown color as they mature and start to get ready for harvest. So trips across the field take some time. Obviously, though, they're not back to back to back. when those trips are not being made across the field, I actually also have a job off the farm. I work for an ag technology company where I actually help growers utilize a lot of the data they're collecting in their cab to help them make a better decision. I really enjoy doing that. It allows me to go out and talk with other growers, teach them, and really help talk about how they can use that data on their farm, just like we're collecting here today, to really do what's best for the land and also make that best decision moving forward so they can continue to farm for years to come.
And as we're riding along today with the Isley family, what questions do you have for a soybean farmer? All right, so once the soybeans are out of the combine and into the truck has to take those soybeans somewhere. So I'm here with Lori, and we are headed to meet the truck at the place where they're unloaded.
So we're on our way to our local grain elevator, and the elevator that we go to is an MAC elevator, which is Michigan Ag Commodities, and you're going to have a chance when we get there. Hopefully we'll be able to see this process from both sides. So we're going to try and not only see how the truck goes through and unloads the grain, and the grain gets tested for quality as well as for moisture, and then the farmer can make the decision about what they want to do with that grain, whether they want to sell it right now or whether they want to put it on what's called DP, which is delayed price, and then they can wait and see what the market does later, because farmers, of course, don't get to pick the price that they sell at. They're really set at selling it at what the Chicago Board of Trade says the price is going to be at on any given day. Right now the prices are fairly historically low, so the farmers aren't really making a lot of money selling these crops. So many of us will put it on delayed price and hope that the price goes up later and we can sell it then. So that's what we're going to try and do. And we're really lucky that our elevator's pretty close. We only have to go about 7 miles to get to ours. There are people that have to travel sometimes up to an hour to get to their elevator, and so they have to have multiple trucks and a lot more equipment to do that, and oftentimes it really slows down their harvest because they just have to wait for the elevators for their trucks to get back before they can actually continue working. So we're fortunate that we are able usually to make that round trip and get back in time so that Jacob's not waiting too long for us to return so he can continue working in the field, because you always worry about whether you're going to get heavy winds or something that's going to cause what we call lodging, which is when the soybeans fall down in the field. And you worry about those kinds of things, or if it gets extensively wet. So when the weather is good, they often say make hay while the sun shines. Around here it's, well, combine beans while the sun shines. So we're going to go ahead and see what we can see at the elevator, and hopefully you'll learn some new things.
Why do they call it an elevator?
That's a really good question. They used to actually have like pulley-like things that would help to load the grain elevators. I think that's what it was, but I think that's a good question for us to ask when we get there. Thanks so much for being a part of our soybean harvest today. I want to introduce you to our farm pets, because I don't think it would be a proper farm if it didn't have a couple farm dogs. This is Ike and Allie. These are our golden retrievers. And Jake, who you met on the combine, this is Oscar, which is his chocolate lab. And they like very much to be out running through the fields. So anyways, you might be wondering what happens to those soybeans after they finally go to the elevator, and then there's a decision made about when to sell them, which we've talked about a little bit. But the field, we don't just leave the field the way it is. What we try and do is to leave as much residue as possible on the top of the field. And by residue, I mean like the stalks and the stuff that was cut up by the combine and then left in the field, because that holds the soil in place. And if we hold the soil in place, then we have less erosion. And so that's one of the ways that we try and protect our soils. That also keeps that soil from not running into our nearby lakes and streams, which is another way that we protect our water quality. We do practice something called crop rotation. And crop rotation is actually planting corn one year and then soybeans the next, or sometimes people will put wheat or hay or some other things in there. And we use this great big tool that's behind us. It's called a strip tillage tool, and we will actually use that this fall in the soybean field. And it will go through, and what it does is it digs up just a small path of earth right in the field, about 7 to 10 inches wide. And then as it goes through there in the spring, we'll travel down that very same little strip and we'll plant a seed in there. And so what that does is all the rest of the field is kept undisturbed, and that's really good. That means we get more earthworms, it means we get more of other microorganisms, and it means that there's more organic matter, which is really good stuff to have in your soil. It helps your plants to grow. I'm sure a few of you have questions too about GMOs. All the soybeans that you saw harvested today are GMOs. In fact, about 90% of the soybeans harvested in the United States are GMOs. We don't have any concerns about, I don't personally have any concerns about GMOs. I think they've been very heavily tested. If I were to have a handful of GMO soybeans and another handful of non-GMO soybeans, there is no possible way that you could tell the difference. They are virtually identical. In fact, it's only one gene pair that's been changed, and so it really isn't something that you would see any difference in. The reason we use GMOs is it helps us to be more profitable, but more importantly, it really helps us to be able to use safer herbicides in smaller amounts. And so by doing that, we can help give our crops an advantage because they grow, there's not as much weeds pressure to compete with them, and it also gives them the opportunity to get a head start on some of the other adverse conditions with diseases and so on. So that's why we make that decision. I'm comfortable feeding that to my family. I'm comfortable feeding that to my livestock, and I think that it can be really beneficial when we're looking at the possibility of having to feed a continually growing population.